it's Julian, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make lo-fi house synths in Massive. I did a video about how to do this in Serum, and actually a lot of people requested that I do it in Massive, so I figured why not. Now, you can get the presets as well as these MIDI files and the project from this video in the description for free, so make sure to check that out. And yeah, let's dive in. So, I have this thing in front of me. It's the thing you heard in the intro. I'm going to go layer by layer and show you what's going on. So, the first layer we have here is this little chord synth. So, the way I made this is basically, it's all about this little mellow font, I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce that, but it's all about this little wave table. The thing is that a lot of times these wave tables don't really sound good for like lead or chord or pad sounds, but this one actually is pretty nice. It has kind of like a saw wave-y sort of timbre to it, but it's kind of just a little bit more controllable. And also you can see I have the sine shaper down here. So anyway, the way I made this was I took this mellow font wavetable and then a saw wave. The saw wave is an octave up. I have those going into a low pass filter with an envelope on it. I just use envelope 4 since it's also the amplitude envelope by default. I figured it would sound the cleanest. I have that going into a sine shaper like I was saying before, so it kind of does like a little bit. It's very similar to FM synthesis. If I turn this drive down, you can hear when I start turning it up, it's just sort of adding that like extra little bit of digitalness. So after that, I have it going into a chorus and then a reverb, and I set those pretty simply. I actually think this chorus is just the stock setting, so that's interesting. And then the reverb, I have the size is down a bit, so that's why it's kind of more controlled, because by default, that's a little bit longer than I wanted. I wanted it to be a little bit more controlled. So yeah, so the next synth is this one. It's this pad sound. So the way I made this one was pretty simple. Basically, it's just a saw wave going into a low-pass filter with a bit of resonance, and then I used a bunch of chorus and a bit of reverb, and then a little bit of vibrato. So if you listen, you can hear this patch is kind of like warbly. It kind of sounds, like the pitch is sort of modulating very quickly. That's because of this vibrato. What vibrato essentially is if you think about it, it's just like an LFO on your pitch. It essentially just makes it go up and down, and you can control how fast it is and the depth and all of that. In Massive, it comes as one of these macros just sort of by default. So I use that here, and it really gives it a cool vibe because obviously this, although it's a nice pad sound, it's a very basic one, but when you add this vibrato, it just kind of gives it a little bit of an extra oomph, if you kind of know what I mean. So that's why I made the pad. The next thing here is this bass, which is also a pretty simple Massive patch. I have the square saw on completely to the left, so it's basically just a square wave. And then I have that with actually a little bit of the modulation oscillator. So I use a tiny bit of phase modulation and a little bit of the FM from the filter as well. For the filter, I just have a low pass with a little bit of resonance. It doesn't have an envelope on it. I actually had experimented with one, that's why this is there. But yeah, it doesn't have an envelope on it. And then, like I said, I have the phase modulation on the actual oscillator, and then I have this filter FM. So the phase modulation, I kind of have to turn off the filter for you to hear it. It's very subtle. But you can hear it just makes it like a little bit more crunchy, and like I was saying before, it makes it like a little bit more digital as well. One thing about lo-fi house is a lot of the sounds are actually like kind of digital sounding, because a lot of times it's trying to emulate like the kind of older like 80s and 90s synth sounds that were a lot based on like FM synthesis and different digital synthesis methods like that. So going for these kind of more digital sounds is something that I try to do. So then also I have that filter FM, so if I turn that off and start turning it up, you can hear it just makes it a little bit like kind of nastier sounding, a little bit more bitey. So then after that, I just had that going into this small reverb here. I didn't want to use too much reverb, but I do like using it for the basses in these kind of tracks because it does give it a little bit more atmosphere and like a little bit more texture. So that was why I added that. And I believe I played around with the EQ on this one a little bit. Yeah, so I turned the high shelf down a little bit to make it a little bit more lo-fi. And then I added this little low shelf boost. So if you listen before, you can hear it was very kind of weak and thin sounding. So this just sort of beefs it up a little bit. So the last synth here is this lead, which sounds like this. So the way I made this one is basically I just used the VA, the pulse width, the pulse width modulation oscillator in here. I have it all the way to the left, so it's just on a pulse wave, which is just very similar to a square wave. And then what I did is on this pulse width here, I have an LFO. So what the LFO is doing is it's actually got a square wave as its sort of waveform. And you can see I have a very high rate, which is not synced, and it's not going to restart either. So that is just like really controlling this pulse width, and I'll kind of show you what it does. So here's without it. And then if I turn it up, you hear it kind of gives it like that 8-bit sort of vibe. This is how a lot of those kind of sounds are made with like pulse width modulation. So I wanted to put some of that in here. And then you can also see on the pitch here, I have this LFO. So what this one is doing is it's kind of doing like this sort of very fast vibrato effect, kind of like what I was talking about before. But this one, the kind of idea is you have a very fast rate and a very low depth. So it's not really doing that much. You can see I only have it up 12 here, and I have the amplitude set like there. So it's not really going that hard, but the rate is very fast. And I'll show you without it. So you can hear without it. It's a little bit more just like a bland kind of square pulse wave type of sound, but then with it, it adds kind of like this interesting pitch fluctuation. When I really turn it up, you can hear it there. This is actually a very popular technique in hardstyle leads, oddly enough, and a lot of like EDM producers use that too. So then after that, I just basically have it going into a low pass filter and then into a chorus and a reverb. I didn't really want to do too much with the effects on this one since there was really a lot going on with this pulse width and then that little pitch thing. I was kind of just, the idea was those are sort of like, you know, the main parts of this sound, and then this other stuff is just to sort of accentuate that. So yeah, so I guess I turned down the dry wet on the reverb a little bit, and then I played around with the EQ as well. I just turned down the high shelf because that had a lot of high end in it, and again, if we're going for lo-fi house, you kind of want to, you know, cut the high end a little bit. So yeah, so that's really it for this one. Like I said, if you want to get these presets and this MIDI and this project file and all of that, it's for free in the description. Just click the first link and you can get it. Thank you again, guys. Make sure to like this video as well as subscribe and check out my social media in the description. And I will see you guys again tomorrow with another tutorial.